The chamber was at the bottom of the building, below the ground level, below the mechanical levels, below everything. The corridor leading to it got narrower the further down they went, as if the building itself was not sure it wanted anyone to reach the end. The lights changed too. At the top, they had been white and clean. Down here, they were the dull amber of something old. The door to the chamber was round and made of a dark metal that had no shine to it. It was thick enough that Cole could see it was not just a door. It was a seal, the kind of thing you build when you are serious about keeping something in, or keeping someone from getting out. 3 Velkaran technicians stood at a monitoring station to the left of the door. They wore pale gray uniforms and held data tablets and looked at Cole with the careful expressions of people who had seen this go badly before and expected to see it go badly again. The lead technician, a thin woman with close-cut silver hair, explained the process in flat, professional language. The chamber would read his neural patterns and build a simulation from his own memory and emotional history. It would find the things that frightened him most and make them real. It would find the moments he most wanted to forget and put him back inside them. It would continue until his mind could no longer maintain coherent function, at which point the chamber would release him automatically. Most subjects, she said, describe the experience as drowning, not in water, in themselves. Cole nodded. What do I do when I come out? She paused. No human representative has come out. Right, Cole said, but if I do. Sit down, breathe. Do not try to stand until you are ready. Got it, he said. The round door opened. The inside of the chamber was small and completely featureless. White walls, white floor, white ceiling. No furniture, no light source that he could identify, but the whole space was evenly lit anyway. It was the kind of room that had no shadows, and the absence of shadows made it feel wrong in a way that was hard to name. Cole walked in. The door sealed behind him without a sound. For about 30 seconds nothing happened. He stood in the center of the room and waited. He kept his breathing even. He looked at the walls, and then at the ceiling, and then at the floor. Then the floor changed. It did not shift or crack or dissolve. It simply became something else. One moment it was white, and the next it was dirt. Packed, dark, familiar dirt. The walls changed next. They became concrete, rough and stained, with a low ceiling that pressed down close. A single bare bulb hung from above, swinging slightly, though there was no wind. A wooden chair sat in the center of the room, under the light. Cole had sat in that chair before. He recognized the scratch on the left front leg. He had made that scratch himself, working at it with one fingernail over the course of many hours, during a time when having something to do with his hands was the only thing keeping him from going somewhere inside himself he might not come back from. He stood still and looked at the chair. The chamber waited. He walked over and sat down in it. Most subjects, when the chamber presented their worst memories, tried to leave. They turned away, or closed their eyes, or went somewhere else in their mind. The chamber followed them. It always caught up. That was the design. The fear was inescapable, because the fear came from inside the subject. You could not run from yourself. Cole did not run. He sat in the chair and looked at the room, and let the memory come back, the way a tide comes in. Slow and complete. He felt the cold that had lived in those walls. He felt the particular quality of the silence that follows when men outside a door stop talking, and you do not know what comes next. He felt all of it, and he did not push it away. This was the thing the chamber had not been built to expect. It had been built for people who were afraid of their memories. Cole was not afraid of his. He had spent a long time with them. He had looked at them from every angle. He had turned them over and found all the edges. They were heavy, and they were ugly, and they were his. and he had learned a long time ago that the only thing worse than carrying something like that was pretending it was not there. The chamber escalated. The room changed again. This time, it was a mountain. Cold air, sharp and thin. The kind that cuts the inside of your throat when you breathe too fast. Gray rock under his boots. A sky the color of dirty iron. He was walking. His left ankle was wrong, the bones sending a clean, bright signal of pain with every step. He had no water. The pack on his back was empty, except for a radio that did not work, and a folding knife, and a photograph he had not looked at in 3 days, because looking at it made it harder to keep moving. He kept moving. The chamber pushed the pain higher. It added cold. It added the sound of wind in a narrow pass that sounded almost like a voice. It added the dropping light of evening, and the specific terror of knowing you had to find shelter in the next 30 minutes, or the night would find you first. Cole kept walking. Outside the chamber, the lead technician watched her monitor, with a small line forming between her brows. The neural stress indicators had gone up hard in the first 20 minutes. That was normal. What was not normal was what happened next. They plateaued. Then they dropped slightly. The chamber was running at full intensity, and the subject's fear response was decreasing. She pulled up the memory logs and read them, and then called the second technician over and showed her. The second technician read the logs and said nothing for a long moment. "He is engaging with it," she said finally. "Subjects do not engage with it," the lead technician said. "This one is," the second technician said. They watched the readouts together. The chamber was presenting material that had collapsed species-wide champions in under an hour. The human subject was not collapsing. He was not fighting the material either. He was doing something the monitoring software had no category for. The closest word in Vel Quran was one that roughly meant digesting. He was taking the memories in and processing them and moving through them and coming out the other side. 3 hours passed, then 6, then 12. One of the technicians went to sleep in her chair. The other two took turns watching the monitors. At the end of the second day, Princess Seraphine came down to the monitoring station herself. She stood behind the technicians and looked at the readouts, and did not speak for a long time. "How long?" she said. 61 hours, the lead technician said. "He has shown no signs of collapse. The chamber has escalated 17 times. Each time his baseline settles lower than before." Seraphine looked at the readout that showed the current simulation. She read the memory index. She looked at the list of events the chamber had sourced from his mind to build its world. She read through the list slowly. She said nothing. On the morning of the third day, the door opened. Cole walked out. He sat down on the floor because there were no chairs nearby, and his legs were tired. He held out one hand, and a technician put a cup of water in it without being asked. He drank it slowly. He looked at the walls of the corridor and breathed. His hands were steady. Seraphine crouched down to his level, which was something a Valkyrian princess did not normally do. She looked at him carefully. "How?" she said. One word. Cole finished the water. He set the cup down on the floor beside him. "You ever been really afraid?" he said. It was not quite a question. "I completed this chamber myself as part of my training," she said. 9 hours. It is the longest time recorded among my people. Cole looked at the floor. "I spent 11 months in a room not much bigger than that chamber," he said. "Before that, longer in a place I won't name. And before that, other things." He paused. "The dark stopped being something new a long time ago. It is just the place I keep coming back to." Seraphine looked at him for a long time. Then she stood up. She walked to the corridor and spoke quietly to her aide. "Pull every historical record we have on the human species," she said. "All of it. Start with the period they call the 20th century and work forward." Her aide nodded and left. Seraphine looked back at Cole one more time. He was still sitting on the floor, turning the empty cup in his hands, looking at nothing in particular. She walked away and did not sleep well that night. The reckoning court was held in a chamber above the grand hall. It was smaller, but felt heavier somehow, the way a room feels when the things said inside it tend to matter. The walls were lined with carved records of every trial ever held in that space, names and dates and verdicts, all in the angular Velcaron script that Cole could not read. He had been told there were over 400 entries. He had been told no entry in the last 200 years had ended in a passing verdict. 9 judges sat in a high curved row at the front of the room. They were from 9 different species. Some Cole recognized from the briefing files, others he did not. They wore formal robes in the colors of their respective civilizations, and they all had the same expression, the careful, neutral face of people who had decided something before they sat down, and were waiting for the proceedings to make it official. Cole sat alone at a plain table in the center of the floor. No legal counsel. The council had offered him a translator, and he had declined. The chip behind his ear was enough. The gallery above was full again. Word had gotten out about the drowning dark. 3 days, 61 hours. The number had moved through the council building like a stone dropped in still water, sending rings out in every direction. Creatures that had ignored humanity's application suddenly wanted to be present for Stage 2. They filled every seat and stood in the back and spoke to each other in low voices while they waited. The lead judge was the old Velcaran named Orath. He had white skin even by Velcaran standards, and his eyes were very pale, the color of ice over shallow water. He had been a judge in the reckoning court for 60 years. He had a voice like something heavy being set down on a stone floor. "The reckoning court will begin," Orath said. "The purpose of this proceeding is to examine the full historical record of the species applying for membership, and determine whether that record is compatible with the standards and values of the Galactic Sovereignty Council. The human representative will be permitted to respond when the examination is complete." Cole nodded. The prosecution began. It was conducted by a Velcaran official named Saif, young by the standards of his species, with sharp features and a precise manner of speaking that made everything he said sound like it had been measured before it left his mouth. He had clearly prepared well. He had source material. He had dates and numbers and names. He started with the wars, the First World War, the Second World War, the numbers of dead, the methods, the weapons. He described the development of bombs that could erase cities. He described the camps. He described what had been done inside them with the flat precision of a man reading from a document, because he was reading from a document. He described the deliberate killing of populations, children included, and the careful record-keeping that had gone along with it, as if the record-keeping made it more civilized. The gallery was quiet. Saith moved on to colonialism, the systematic conquest of other human populations by other human populations, the removal of people from their land, the erasure of languages and practices and ways of living that had existed for thousands of years, the use of other human beings as property, the legal structures built to maintain it, the violence used to enforce it. He described what humans had done to their own planet, the slow poisoning of the air and the water, the disappearance of species that had existed for millions of years, the measurable rise in the temperature of the whole world caused by choices made over generations with full knowledge of the consequences. He went on for 6 hours. Cole sat at his table and listened to all of it. He did not move much. He drank water when a cup was placed near him. He did not look down at his hands or up at the gallery. He looked at the judges, one at a time, slowly, the way a man looks when he is paying real attention and not just waiting for his turn to speak. When Saith finished, Orath looked at Cole. "The human representative may respond." Cole was quiet for a moment, not a long moment, just long enough that the room paid attention to it. Then he said, "Everything he said is true, all of it. Every number, every name, every method. I am not going to stand here and tell you it did not happen, or that it was less bad than it sounds. It happened. It was that bad. Sometimes it was worse. That was not the expected opening. But I want to ask something, Cole said. He looked at Orath. How old is the Velkaran Empire? Orath's expression did not change. 4,000 years. 4,000 years, Cole said. And how long has the Velkaran Empire been at peace with its neighboring systems? Roughly 2,000 years, Orath said slowly. So it took your civilization 2,000 years to stop fighting its neighbors, Cole said. 2,000 years to develop the values that got you a seat in this council. He let that sit for a second. Humanity developed written language approximately 5,000 years ago. Before that, we lived in small groups and hit each other with rocks. 6,000 years ago, we made tools out of bronze. 400 years ago, we thought the Earth was the center of the universe, and people were burned alive for saying otherwise. 60 years after we built our first aircraft, we landed on the moon. We went from a wood and fabric plane that flew for 12 seconds to setting boots on another world in 60 years. He leaned forward slightly. 200 years ago, we still had legal slavery in parts of our world. 100 years ago, we fought the largest war in our history. 50 years ago, we were pointing weapons at each other that could have ended everything. And then, he paused. And then we stopped. Not all at once, not cleanly, loudly, messily, with arguments that went on for decades and laws that did not work the first time, and organizations that failed and were rebuilt. We stopped. We looked at what we had done to each other and to our world, and we said, this has to change, and we meant it even when we were bad at following through. He looked along the row of 9 judges. You are not judging our history. Every species in this room has a history. You are judging our speed. You are judging how fast a species can move from hitting each other with rocks to sitting in a room like this one and asking to be held to a higher standard. And I will tell you that by that measure, there is no species in this council that has moved faster. Not one. The gallery was very still. Cole sat back. We are still messy. We are still loud. We still argue about everything. But we are here, and we are asking. And the asking is something we mean. That should count for something. Orath looked at him for a long time. Then he looked at the other judges. They did not speak out loud. There was a private channel for that. A soft current of communication Cole could not hear. In the gallery above, Saravin sat very still. She had Cole's full service record open on her personal terminal. She had been reading it since the previous evening. She had reached sections that were marked with the highest classification levels available to her rank. Some sections were still blocked, even to her. She looked down at Cole sitting alone at the plain table, and she thought about the room he had described. 11 months. And before that, and before that. She closed the file. She opened the communications channel to her aide. Find out, she said quietly, what a place called Kandahar is. Her aide sent back an answer 12 minutes later. Saravin read it. She read it again. She set the terminal face down on the railing in front of her, and looked at the ceiling of the chamber for a long moment. Below her, Orath announced that the Reckoning Court would deliver its assessment before the 3rd stage. The session was temporarily suspended. The gallery began to move and shift, and the sound of 100 different species speaking at once filled the room. Cole stood up from his table. He stretched his back once, quietly. He picked up the water cup and finished what was left in it. Then, he put the cup down and stood and waited for someone to tell him what came next. He had the same expression he had walked in with, calm, unhurried, the look of a man who had been waiting in rooms his whole life and had made a certain peace with it. The arena was on the eastern side of the council complex, open at the top, so the sky came through in a wide rectangle of pale gray light. The floor was the same dark stone as the landing pad, smooth and flat, and wide enough that the far wall felt far away. The seats rose steeply on all four sides, and every one of them was taken. Cole stood at the entrance to the floor level and looked at the space. He did it the way he always looked at new spaces, starting at the left and moving right. Exits first, then heights, then surfaces, then shadows, then anything that moved. He did it in about 4 seconds, and then he walked in. The crowd noise dropped as he appeared. Then it rose again, a different kind of sound than before, sharper. The word had moved fast. 61 hours in the drowning dark. The argument in the reckoning court that had left 3 of the 9 judges saying nothing for a long time after he finished speaking. They wanted to see what the third stage would do. Vorath was already on the floor. He was not hard to notice. 2.5 meters of Velkaron, built for fighting, wide across the chest, with long arms and legs that had the particular density of a body trained from childhood. He wore ceremonial armor, dark green, and fitted close, with no plating on the joints, because the joints were fast enough not to need it. He had won 47 sanctioned combats, not matches, combats. The distinction in Velkaron culture was meaningful. A match had rules about damage. A combat had one rule, which was that both parties agreed to enter. Vorath looked at Cole the way a man looks at something he is trying to figure out. He had heard the same things the rest of the gallery had heard. He had looked at Cole's physical file: human male, medium build, medium height, middle age, listed as retired. Nothing in the numbers said anything that concerned him. But something in the way the human was looking at the arena made Vorath stand a little differently than he had a moment before. A council official announced the third stage, the ordeal of equals. The rules were simple. The stage ended when one participant could not continue. Weapons were available on racks at the east and west walls. Their use was not required. Conduct was expected to be honorable, which in Velkaran terms meant no strikes to kill and no strikes after yield. Everything else was the judgment of the combatants. The officials stepped back. The arena fell quiet. Vorath walked toward the weapon rack on the east wall. He moved smoothly for his size. Cole watched him move. He watched the length of Vorath's stride, the way his weight shifted, which foot he led with, how his shoulders sat when he was walking, versus how they would sit when he stopped. Cole had been reading bodies his entire adult life. It was a habit built from necessity, the same way you learn to read the weather when you spend enough time outside. Cole did not move toward the weapon rack. He stood in the center of the floor and waited. Vorath reached the rack, selected a long-handled blade, tested its weight twice in his right hand, and turned around. He saw that Cole had not moved. He saw that Cole had also, in the time it took Vorath to reach the rack and turn around, shifted position slightly. Not toward a weapon, toward a different part of the floor. A position closer to the south wall, closer to a shadow line, where the overhead light did not reach evenly. Something moved behind Vorath's eyes. He came forward. The first exchange was fast. Vorath covered the distance with 3 long strides, and brought the blade around in a wide testing arc. Not a full commitment. The kind of strike designed to see how a target moved. Cole moved left and low, not jumping, not rolling, just stepping, short and precise, so the arc went past him with space to spare. He kept his hands where they were. The gallery made a sound. Vorath came again, faster this time. A combination, blade followed by his offhand, 2 points of contact that arrived close together. Cole moved through the gap between them the way water moves through a crack in stone. Not over or under, but through, taking up exactly the space available, and no more. His right hand came up once on the way through, and touched Vorath's forearm at a specific angle. Vorath's grip on the blade loosened for half a second. He caught it, but it had happened. He stopped. He reset. He looked at Cole differently. What followed was not a quick fight. It was 11 minutes of the most focused attention the Velkaran arena had seen in a generation. Vorath was genuinely skilled. He was not simply large. He had technique and patience and the kind of combat intelligence that 47 victories builds in a person. He adjusted. He changed angles. He went to combinations Velkaran fighters did not normally use because they were considered inelegant. Cole had no interest in elegance. He moved through the arena the way someone moves through a building they grew up in. He knew where the light changed. He knew where the footing was slightly less even, near the north wall, from a join in the stone. He used the corners twice in ways that turned Vorath's reach from an advantage into a problem. When Vorath's blade came close, Cole moved with it, instead of away from it, taking the momentum and redirecting it, using the arc to open angles that had not been there a second before. In the 4th minute, Cole took the blade. It was not a dramatic moment. It was quick and quiet and technical. Vorath's grip met a specific pressure at a specific angle, and the blade changed hands before he had fully registered that it was gone. Cole stepped back and held it loosely at his side, and looked at Vorath. Vorath reached to the rack along the south wall for a second weapon, a shorter one. He came again. Cole broke it against the edge of the north wall in the 7th minute. By the 9th minute, Vorath was working with his hands alone. He was not finished. He had training for that too, but he was reading a different version of this fight now. The human did not fight like a Velkaran trained for combat. He did not fight like any species Vorath had faced before. He fought like someone for whom fighting was not a discipline. It was a language he had been forced to become fluent in by circumstances that had not asked his permission. There was no ceremony in it, no system, just a deep and practical knowledge of what the human body could do and what happened when you applied that knowledge to another body at speed. At the end of the 11th minute, Vorath's leg gave way under a particular combination of pressure that Cole applied at the knee joint from a direction Vorath had not covered. It was not a break. Cole had been careful about that. But Vorath went down to one knee, and his balance was wrong, and he knew, with the honesty that lives inside any real fighter, that he was done. He looked up at Cole. Cole was standing 2 steps away, breathing harder than he had been at the start, but not much harder. He held out his right hand, palm up, fingers together, a human gesture. Vorath did not know what it meant. In some human cultures it meant victory. In others it meant help up. In others it was an offer of respect. Vorath looked at it. Then he reached up and took it. Cole held his grip and helped him up. Then he let go and stepped back, and that was the end of it. The gallery did not cheer. It was not the silence of disappointment. It was the silence of a room full of creatures that had just seen something they did not have a ready category for, and needed a moment to find one. In the observation room above the arena, Saravan stood with both hands on the railing. Her aide stood just behind her left shoulder. "Princess," the aide said, very quietly, "there is a file." "I know about his file," Saravan said. She had been pulling records since the Drowning Dark. She knew about the deployments. She knew about the places he had been sent and the things that had been asked of him. "Not that file," the aide said. "A Council intelligence file. It is above standard clearance. I was only able to see the designation and a summary." She paused. "They call him Grim Justice. It is a classification code reserved for individuals that the Council's Threat Assessment Division marks as a singular civilizational variable, meaning one person whose presence changes the outcome of events at the level of entire species." She stopped. "There are 14 such designations currently active in the known galaxy. He is the only human." Saravan did not speak for a long moment. Below, Cole was being walked off the arena floor by a council official. He was not looking at the gallery. He was not looking at Vorath. He was looking at the exit on the far side of the arena, the same way he had looked at all the exits when he first walked in. He knew, Saravan said. He knew we would pull every file we had on him after the arena. He let us find it. Her aide said nothing. Saravan picked up her terminal. She opened a channel to the Council Intelligence Division and requested the full Grim Justice file under her authority as trial overseer. The response came back in 40 seconds. Access denied. Authorization level insufficient. She set the terminal down. She looked at Cole's back as he walked through the far exit. She thought about the drowning dark. She thought about the reckoning court. She thought about 11 minutes in the arena, and the way he had held out his hand to the man he had just beaten. She thought about what her aide had read to her when she asked what Kandahar was. She left the observation room and told her aide to arrange a private meeting. The meeting room was small and high up, near the top of the council building, where the glass walls let the city spread out below in all its layers of colored light. There was no table, just 2 chairs facing each other, with a low surface between them that held 2 cups and a vessel of something warm that was not quite tea but served the same purpose. The aide had set it up and then left without being asked to, which said something about how seriously she was taking the evening. Saravan was already seated when Cole arrived. He had changed into fresh clothes, the same style as before, plain and dark. He had combed his hair. That was the only concession. He sat down across from her and looked at the city through the glass for a moment, and then looked at her. She studied him the way she had been studying him since the first moment in the Grand Hall, but it was different now. Before, she had been looking for weakness, for the place where he would break, because everything broke eventually. That was what the trial was designed to confirm. Now she was looking for something else, and she was not entirely sure what it was. "I said you would not survive," she said. "You were working from what you had," Cole said. That was reasonable. "The file," she said. "Grim Justice. You did not earn that classification through the trial." "No. You earned it before you came here." "Yes." She folded her hands in her lap. "I requested the full file from the Intelligence Division. My clearance was not sufficient." "I know," Cole said. "You know what your own classification level requires to access." "I know what most files about me require," he said. "It is useful information." She looked at him. "The Keth incident," she said. 3 years ago, a cascade conflict nearly began in the Soft Sector. 6 species. It would have pulled in 1/3 of the outer systems. The Council's intelligence summary says it was prevented by a single intervention at a critical junction point. She paused. "You were listed as retired at the time." "I was retired," Cole said. "Then why were you there?" He picked up one of the cups and held it in both hands. The warmth of it was not something he was thinking about, but his hands held it anyway, the way hands do when they have learned to take small comfort where it is available. "Because it needed doing," he said, "and I was the one who knew how." "You were living on a coast somewhere," she said, quietly, "according to the surveillance summary." "I was." "You left that to prevent a war." "I left that because if I had not, and the war had started, the number of people who would have died was a number I could not carry," he said. It was not a heroic statement. It was a plain one. The way a man states a fact that is not open to argument, because it has already been decided in him for a long time. Saravan was quiet for a moment. In Velkaran, there was a word for the weight a person chooses not to set down. It was not quite the same as duty. Duty was imposed from outside. This word describes something you picked up yourself, looked at clearly, understood the full cost of, and then put back on your shoulders because the alternative was worse. It was considered one of the highest qualities a person could have. She had thought it was a quality her culture had developed over 4,000 years of civilization. She was revising that. "I will recommend membership," she said. "All 4 Velkaran votes. The recommendation will be unanimous." Cole set down the cup. Thank you. I am not doing it as a kindness, she said. I am doing it because I spent 2 days trying to find a reason why a species that produced you deserves to be kept outside this council. I could not find one. The logic does not hold. Cole looked at the city below the glass. We are not all like me, he said. Most of us are ordinary, loud, bad at long-term thinking. We argue about everything, and we change our minds too fast and not fast enough, depending on the subject. We are difficult. I know, Saravan said. I have read your history files. I have been reading them since the drowning dark. She paused. But all of you produced you. That is the part I cannot argue around. A species does not produce what you are by accident. It produces it by going through things, by surviving things that should have ended it, by coming out the other side, still asking to be better. Cole did not answer right away. He looked at the lights of the city, and he thought about a coast and a house with a porch and the sound of water that did not care about any of this. He thought about the terminal on the porch railing, and the message he already knew was coming, and had probably been coming since before he boarded the transport to come here. You said you lived in the dark, Saravan said. In the chamber, in the mountains, in the rooms without windows. Yes. Does it ever stop? He thought about that honestly. It gets quieter, he said. There are days now that are mostly just days. That is something. She looked at him. There was no pity in it. Velkarons did not do pity the way humans did. It was closer to recognition, seeing something clearly and acknowledging it without looking away. The vote is tomorrow morning, she said. You should rest. Cole stood up. He picked up the cup and finished the last of what was in it. He set it down on the low surface carefully. Princess, he said. She looked up at him. You were doing your job, he said, when you told me I would not survive. That is what the trial is for, to find out who is what they say they are. He paused. I do not take it personally. She said nothing. For what it is worth, he said, I think you are good at your job. He nodded once and left the room. She sat for a while, after he was gone, looking at the city. She thought about the way he had held out his hand to Vorath. She thought about 11 months in a room, and the scratch on a chair leg, worked away at with one fingernail. She thought about all the humans she had read about in the history files. Ordinary people doing terrible things, and then other ordinary people standing up and saying no, and getting knocked down, and standing up again. The whole long, messy argument of a species figuring out what it was. She thought about Cole Harlan getting on a transport to come here alone with a cold cup of coffee and calm eyes. She thought about the 4,000 years it had taken her civilization to earn its seat. She went to her quarters and slept better than she expected to. The vote the following morning lasted 22 minutes. 31 in favor, 2 abstentions, 0 opposed. The announcement was made in the Grand Hall with all 47 delegations present. The sound it made was the particular sound of a room full of creatures that had been surprised by something and were not entirely sure how they felt about it. Cole stood near the back of the hall and watched the announcement board display the result. He had his bag over one shoulder. He had retrieved it from the waiting room 2 days ago and kept it with him since. A Dravakian delegate near him said something in his direction. The translator chip turned it into, "It seems your species has earned its place." We earned it a long time ago, Cole said. It just took the paperwork a while to catch up. He shook several hands, alien and otherwise. He said a few words to Orath, who replied with a shorter version of the formal acknowledgement, and something that might have been respect underneath the formality. He did not look for Saravan. She was at the front of the hall, receiving congratulations from the other delegations. She was good at that, the formal performance of her role. She caught his eye once across the room and gave him a single nod. He returned it. Then he left. The transport back took 2 stops and most of a day. He slept for part of it. ate something that was available at the second stop, and was not good, but was food. He watched the stars through the transport window for a while, which was something he had never gotten tired of doing. He got home in the late afternoon. The coast was cold, the right kind of cold, the kind that has salt in it and moves. He walked from the transport stop to the house, and the gravel on the path made the sound it always made. The door opened the way it always did, the handle slightly stiff at the start. Inside, it smelled like the house, and nothing had moved. He put his bag down in the front room. He went to the kitchen and made coffee. Real coffee, the kind that took time. He waited for it, and watched the light change on the water through the window above the sink. When it was ready, he took it to the porch. He sat in his chair. He put his feet up on the railing. It came in the same way it always did, slow and reliable, and with no opinion about anything. He drank his coffee and thought about nothing in particular for a while, and it was good. His terminal buzzed on the railing beside him. He looked at the screen without picking it up. The message was from an address he knew. It had been quiet for 8 months. He had thought it might stay quiet. 4 words. Well done. Stand by. He looked at the message for a moment. Then he set the terminal face down on the railing. He picked up his coffee. He looked at the water. He stood by. The transport ship touched down on the landing pad at exactly noon, local time. The pad was made of a dark stone that did not exist on Earth. It absorbed light instead of reflecting it, so the whole surface looked like a hole in the ground that went on forever. The air smelled like copper and something sweet that had no name in any human language. Cole Harlan stepped off the ramp and looked around. He was not a large man. He was not particularly tall. He had brown hair that needed cutting and a face that had been hit enough times to look comfortable with it. He wore plain, dark clothes, the kind a man wears when he does not want to be remembered. He carried a small bag over one shoulder and held a cup of something hot in his other hand. He had picked it up in the transit hub 3 stops back, and it had gone cold, but he kept holding it anyway. 2 Velkaran guards met him at the bottom of the ramp. They were both over 2 meters tall, silver-skinned, with long arms and eyes that did not blink the way human eyes did. They wore ceremonial armor that caught the light and threw it back in sharp angles. They looked at Cole the way large dogs look at something small that has wandered into the wrong yard. Cole Harlan, one of them said. The translator chip behind Cole's ear turned the sounds into words. Human representative, you will follow. Sure, Cole said. He followed them across the dark landing pad and through a set of doors that opened without being touched. Inside was a long corridor with walls that were not quite solid. They shifted slowly, like the surface of deep water. Cole watched them as he walked. He did not reach out to touch them. He had learned a long time ago not to touch things in unfamiliar places until he knew what they did. The corridor opened into the grand hall. Cole stopped walking for just a moment, not because he was afraid. Because the hall was genuinely something to look at. It was enormous. The ceiling was so far up that a thin layer of cloud sat near the top of it, pale and slow-moving. The walls were made of a material that looked like glass, but moved slightly, breathing in and out in a rhythm so slow you had to watch for a while before you noticed it. The floor was smooth and dark and reflected everything above it, like still water. Curved rows of seating rose up on both sides, and every seat was filled. 47 species had sent delegates to watch. Cole had read the briefing files on the transport. He recognized some of them. The tall, thin ones near the back were from the Sithori Collective. The ones with the wide, flat heads and the 4 sets of arms were Dravakian. There were others he could not identify, shapes and sizes that had no reference point in anything he had grown up knowing. They all looked at him as he walked in. Some of them leaned toward each other and said things his translator did not catch. He kept walking. At the center of the hall, standing on a raised platform of the same dark stone as the landing pad, was Princess Seravin Alos of the Velcaran Empire. She was tall, like all Velcarans, but there was something in the way she stood that made her seem taller than the others. Her skin was the pale silver of a winter sky just before snow. Her eyes were large and still, and the color of deep water at night. She wore no crown. She did not need one. The way she held herself said everything a crown would have said, and said it louder. She watched Cole walk across the hall toward her. Her expression did not change. She had overseen 11 trials for 11 different species applying for membership in the Galactic Sovereignty Council. None of those species had passed. She had watched ancient civilizations fold under the weight of their own histories. She looked at Cole with the calm of a woman who already knew how this would end. Cole stopped at the base of the platform and looked up at her. "You are the human representative," she said. Her voice carried easily in the large space. The translator chip made it sound flat and clean in Cole's ear. "Cole Harlan," he said. He looked around the hall once, slowly, the way a man looks at a room he is trying to memorize. Then he looked back at her. "Nice place." A low sound moved through the gallery. Not quite laughter, something closer to disbelief. Seravin studied him. She had read his file, the public version. Former soldier. Multiple deployments to places on Earth that were no longer on any map. Listed as retired 4 years ago. She had expected someone harder looking. Someone who carried themselves like a weapon. This man looked like he had stepped out of a quiet life and forgotten to step back in. "The trial has 3 stages," she said. "Each stage is designed to test something different. The first is called the Drowning Dark. It has been completed by 6 species in the history of this council. No human has ever entered it and come back out. Most do not survive the first hour." She let that sit for a moment. "You will not survive, Mr. Harlan." Cole looked at her. His expression did not change. There was nothing in his face that looked like fear or bravado or the forced calm of a man pretending not to be scared. There was just a kind of quiet that had no bottom to it. "They said that in Kandahar," he said. Nobody in the hall knew what Kandahar was. The word meant nothing to any of the 47 species watching. But something in the way he said it moved through the room anyway. The nearest security drone, a floating silver sphere the size of a human head, drifted back about half a meter without being given any instruction to do so. Seravin said nothing. A Velcaran official at the side of the hall announced that the first stage would begin at first dark, in 4 hours. Cole was taken to a waiting room on the lower level. It was plain and clean, and had a chair, a low table, and a window that looked out over the Velcaran capital city. The city was built into the side of a mountain range that had no name Cole could pronounce. It went down and down in layers, each level lit by a different color, so the whole thing looked like a painting done by someone who did not believe in moderation. Cole sat in the chair and drank the rest of his cold coffee. He did not pace. He did not look at his hands. He did not go over the briefing files again. He just sat and looked out the window at the city and breathed slowly and let his mind go somewhere quiet. He had a habit, developed over many years and in many bad places, of going somewhere quiet inside himself when the outside world got loud. It was not meditation. He had never been patient enough for that. It was more like finding a room inside yourself and closing the door and sitting on the floor and just being still until things outside settled or until they did not, and either way, you were ready. The sun, or the thing that served as a sun on this world, went down slowly. The city lit up layer by layer below the window. A guard came to the door. "It is time," the guard said. Cole stood up. He set the empty cup on the table. He rolled his neck once, left and right, and heard the familiar small sound it made. He picked up nothing. He left the bag on the chair.